I didn't say a word when they handed me that eviction notice. I just slid the 1923 water rights deed across the table and watched 35 McMansions turn into lakefront property. The Willowbrook Estates HOA thought they could steal my grandfather's farm while I was deployed in Afghanistan. These pompous bureaucrats built their perfect suburban paradise on stolen land, complete with tennis outfit Karens patrolling in golf carts. What they didn't know, I'm an Army Corps engineer. That little earth dam on my property had been waiting 45 years for someone stupid enough to build downstream. The audacity was truly something to behold until the spillway gates opened and their luxury development got its first taste of natural flooding. That's me. 34 years old, Army Corps of Engineers, and third-generation owner of 47 acres of prime Texas land just outside Austin. My grandfather, who we all called Pops, bought this property back in 1955 when Austin was still a sleepy college town and barbecue joints outnumbered tech companies by about 1,000 to 1. Pops was the kind of man who believed in taking care of the land and the people on it. In 1978, he built a small earth dam on our property, nothing fancy, just good engineering designed to collect rainwater for cattle and help downstream neighbors during dry spells. The Army Corps of Engineers even helped him with the design. Then came my 2 tours in Afghanistan, where I specialized in water management and infrastructure. While I was on my second deployment, Pops passed away. The property went into a trust managed by my well-meaning but overwhelmed sister Sarah, who hired Lanier Land Services to handle taxes and upkeep. 52 years old, president of Willowbrook Estates HOA, and the kind of woman who drives a white BMW X7 and treats tennis outfits like business attire. Maggie's got that particular brand of passive-aggressive sweetness that Southern women perfect around age 45, the kind where they'll smile while stabbing you in the back. Maggie's married to City Councilman Rick Thornwell, which tells you everything about how she gets things done. She's got a reputation for neighborhood beautification initiatives, fancy talk for forcing out anyone who doesn't fit her vision of suburban perfection. I came home from deployment in August 2023, expecting to see rolling pastures and that little earth dam sparkling in the Texas sun. Instead, I found construction crews, concrete trucks, and survey stakes scattered across my back 40 like some kind of suburban invasion. The crunch of gravel under my boots felt different somehow, angrier. I could taste the dust and my own rising fury as I marched up to the construction foreman, his hard hat gleaming in the brutal Texas heat. "Sorry, buddy," he said, not looking sorry at all, barely glancing up from his clipboard. "We got permits and everything. This is Willowbrook Estates property now." I called the police. Officer Martinez showed up 20 minutes later, his discomfort obvious as he explained that the HOA had filed an adverse possession claim while I was overseas. "It's an old law designed to prevent land from sitting empty forever," he said apologetically, "but it's become a favorite tool of developers looking to expand their empire." That's when Maggie appeared, riding up in her little golf cart like some kind of suburban warlord, her perfectly applied makeup somehow still intact despite the August heat. Her voice had that syrupy sweetness that immediately made me want to check my wallet. "Your family abandoned this land, honey," she said, smiling like she was doing me a favor, her manicured fingers drumming against the steering wheel. "We're just putting it to good use for the community. You should have stayed closer to home, soldier boy." But here's what really got my blood boiling: her construction crews had diverted the small creek that feeds Pop's Dam. The water level was dropping every single day, and with it 45 years of careful water management that had helped our neighbors through droughts, floods, and everything in between. As I stood there watching the water level drop, Maggie's parting shot echoed in my ears. That's when I knew this wasn't just about land. It was war. I hired the first attorney I could find, big mistake. This guy quoted me $85,000 just to challenge the zoning change, sitting behind a mahogany desk that probably cost more than most people's cars. His expensive suit couldn't hide the fact that he was more interested in billing hours than winning cases. Turns out while I was serving my country, Rick had pushed through an emergency zoning modification, changing my family's land from agricultural to residential development faster than you can say. Conflict of interest. The metallic taste of adrenaline hit my tongue as I realized the full scope of their corruption. But here's where my Army Corps training came in handy. While that overpriced lawyer was shuffling papers and scheduling meetings 3 weeks out, I was digging through county records like I was hunting for IEDs in hostile territory. And just like in Afghanistan, the devil was in the details, buried beneath layers of bureaucratic paperwork designed to discourage anyone from looking too closely. The courthouse basement smelled like dust and old secrets, fluorescent lights flickering overhead as I spent 12-hour days photographing documents that should have been public but were mysteriously misfiled. My fingers were black with copy toner, but every page revealed another piece of the puzzle. I found Pop's original 1978 dam construction permits. They were beautiful. See, Pops didn't just build that dam himself. He worked directly with the Army Corps of Engineers for flood control and watershed management. That meant federal jurisdiction that local HOAs couldn't override, period. But it gets better. While photocopying permits at the courthouse, I stumbled across a 1923 water rights deed buried in old records. My great-grandfather had purchased senior water rights to the entire Willow Creek watershed. These rights were older than the city, older than every single one of those McMansions sitting on my land. Maggie organized an emergency HOA meeting, complete with a local news crew she'd obviously tipped off in advance. The smell of her expensive perfume couldn't quite mask the stench of cigarette smoke and entitlement that followed her around like a cloud. I watched her on the evening news, standing in front of her perfectly manicured lawn, dabbing at her eyes with tissue that probably cost more per sheet than most people spend on lunch. We're just concerned about our children's safety. That dam looks ready to burst, and we have families living right downstream. The funny thing about local news is they love a good story, but they're not always great with follow-up research. If they'd bothered to check, they would have found that my dam had passed its most recent safety inspection with flying colors just 6 months earlier. But Maggie wasn't done. She posted on Nextdoor, that digital neighborhood watch where HOA presidents go to flex their petty authority, warning about aggressive property disputes and unstable individuals in the area. She never mentioned my name, but she didn't have to. In a community that small, everyone knew exactly who she was talking about. The harassment escalated when she organized what she called a neighborhood safety patrol, 3 HOA board members in matching polo shirts who parked at my property entrance like some kind of suburban checkpoint. They photographed every visitor, wrote down license plates, and filed reports with the sheriff about suspicious activity. Then came the coordinated bureaucratic assault: building inspector, fire marshal, health department, and animal control, all on the same day like some kind of regulatory SWAT team. Each one found minor violations requiring expensive corrections. The building inspector, who happened to be a drinking buddy of Rick's, declared that my front porch needed $8,000 in foundation work. While they were drowning me in paperwork, I was making phone calls. My old Army buddy Tony Riggs at the EPA was very interested to learn that Maggie's HOA had never filed required wetlands assessment before redirecting Willow Creek. The fines for violations start at $50,000 per day. I discovered their entire development was built in what the Army Corps classified as a 100-year floodplain. Their solution? Permanently divert Willow Creek away from new homes and let it flood my property instead. I connected with other HOA victims and discovered a pattern. Maggie's previous HOA in Houston had paid a $2.3 million EPA fine for an identical creek diversion scheme. I partnered with environmental lawyer Amanda Cross and formed a coalition with downstream farmers affected by the creek diversion. Miguel Santos brought documentation showing his family had used creek water for farming since 1887. Mrs. Chen provided photographs of her grandfather's 1940s garden, fed by the same creek now feeding Maggie's decorative water features. During nighttime reconnaissance, I discovered something beautiful. Pop's Dam wasn't just a simple earthwork structure. The original 1978 design included an emergency spillway system with hydraulic gates that hadn't been opened since 1982. The mechanism was still functional and designed for exactly this situation: controlled flooding to restore natural water flow patterns. Using my drone for aerial reconnaissance, I mapped the exact locations of new home foundations relative to the original creek bed. 5 houses were built directly in the historical flood channel. The construction crews had installed decorative creek beds using concrete and decorative stones, pretty, but not designed to handle actual water flow. I calculated the water volume needed to restore Willow Creek to its original path, 2.8 million gallons. The dam was currently holding 3.1 million gallons. The math was perfect. Maggie went nuclear. Rick fast-tracked an eminent domain hearing scheduled for just 2 weeks out. The HOA offered me $180,000 for property assessed at $890,000. The message was clear: take the lowball offer or lose everything. The local newspaper ran a hit piece, "Troubled Veteran Blocks Community Progress." Maggie staged a photo op with 20 concerned mothers holding children near my property line while my farmhouse loomed menacingly in the background. But Maggie made her biggest mistake when her crew began installing permanent concrete barriers to completely block the original creek bed. This gave me perfect justification for what I was about to do. At 7:02 a.m., with federal agents watching and morning sun painting the sky orange, I opened the spillway gates to 25% capacity. The sound was magnificent, not the violent rush of destruction, but the gentle whisper of water returning home. For the first time in 18 months, Willow Creek began flowing in its original bed, exactly where nature intended. Miguel Santos knelt beside the restored creek and cupped clear water in his weathered hands, tears streaming down his face. "This is the water that fed my grandfather's farm for 60 years, he whispered. Maggie's reaction was immediate and predictable. She screamed at federal agents to arrest the terrorist, her carefully composed demeanor cracking like cheap paint. EPA agent Sarah Kim calmly explained, "Ma'am, this gentleman has the legal right to operate his agricultural flood control system." Judge Walsh's courtroom at 2 p.m. was packed tighter than a can of sardines. Maggie arrived with high-powered Houston attorneys, presenting photos of muddy construction sites and claiming $2.7 million in flood damage from my spillway operation. Amanda presented the 1978 Agricultural Flood Management Covenant that legally required seasonal flooding. EPA agent Kim testified that my spillway operation had restored natural water flow patterns without causing any actual property damage. The breaking point came when Amanda called Rick as a witness. Under oath, he admitted to fast-tracking zoning changes while I was deployed overseas. When Amanda played the recorded phone conversation about destroying property values, Rick exploded, "This is a federal setup. We did nothing wrong." Judge Walsh had no choice. He denied all restraining order requests, ruled that my spillway operation was legal and beneficial, and ordered the HOA to cease interference with federal environmental investigations. 6 months later, justice flowed as naturally as the restored creek. Rick Thornwell, 3 years in federal prison for conspiracy charges. Maggie, $8.7 million in civil penalties, filed for bankruptcy. Construction company, $12 million in EPA fines, banned from federal contracts. HOA, dissolved completely. My property value restored to $1.2 million after federal environmental designation. The $340,000 insurance fraud settlement went to a good cause. I bought Miguel's family farm at tax auction and returned it to him debt-free. The restored creek now attracts ecotourism, kayaking, bird watching, and fishing where McMansions were supposed to stand. Protected Guadalupe base populations recovered to pre-diversion levels within 4 months. The Audubon Society documented 12 bird species returning to restored wetland habitat. Mrs. Chen's garden became a demonstration site for sustainable agriculture. 3 downstream farms reported their best crop yields in a decade. Environmental groups used the Willow Creek model to challenge illegal diversions statewide. Federal agencies cite our case in new water rights enforcement guidelines. We established the Pops Morrison Environmental Scholarship for rural students studying water management. The annual Creek Days Festival celebrates restoration and community resilience with local food, environmental education, and veteran support services. My favorite part, kids swimming in the creek where homes were supposed to be built, splashing in water that flows free because a community stood together. From my porch each evening, watching that creek flow exactly where it belongs, I'm reminded that some fights are worth everything you've got. Sometimes you have to flood the valley to save the creek. Every Sunday I visit Pop's grave and bring creek water in a mason jar, just like he used to do when he checked flow after heavy rains. "Thanks, Pops," I tell him. "The creek's singing again just like you said it would." The Willow Creek Conservation Trust now owns development rights to the entire watershed, creating a permanent buffer zone that prevents future commercial development. No one will ever steal this water again. But here's the beautiful twist: Maggie's Houston HOA faced federal RICO prosecution based on our case. 147 families across 3 states filed similar water rights restoration lawsuits. What started as one veteran's fight became a movement for environmental justice nationwide. If you're fighting HOA overreach, environmental destruction, or bureaucratic bullying, don't give up. Document everything. Find allies. Remember, the law is on your side when you're protecting the land for future generations. Water finds a way. Justice finds a way. And communities that fight together win together. Willow Creek flows free, y'all. And it always will. Next week, the city that tried to steal my neighbor's solar farm, so she cut power to City Hall during the mayor's wedding reception. That's a story about a different kind of power and how one engineer turned the lights out on municipal corruption.